Daytona 1969. A Ford is pulling away on the back straight, and it doesn't look like any Ford anyone has seen before. The nose is longer, the grille sits flush against the body, almost sealed shut. It's quieter than the cars around it. Less engine noise, more wind. Across the 1969 and 1970 seasons combined, this car will win 29 Grand National races, more than any other model, a driver's championship, a manufacturer's title. Then Ford builds it for 1 year, sells fewer than 800 of them, and never makes it again. Most people who know cars can name the Mustang. They can name the GT40. Ask them about this one, and you get a blank look. That's strange, because by the numbers, this might be the fastest production Ford of its era. So why did it disappear from memory, almost as fast as it disappeared from the assembly line? The answer starts a year earlier. With Ford defending ground, it had only just taken on the exact tracks where this car would go on to win. This is the story of the 1969 Ford Talladega. By 1969, Ford was defending ground, not chasing it. Its 1968 Torino fastback had performed well on the superspeedways, and Dodge had responded with a more aerodynamic car of its own, the Charger 500, built specifically to answer it. The instinct might be to assume Ford's next move was a bigger engine, more cubic inches, more horsepower, brute force. But NASCAR in this era raced actual production cars. The rule was called homologation. If a manufacturer wanted to race a body style, it first had to build and sell at least 500 copies to the public. That rule mattered more than horsepower, because it meant the car that won on Sunday had to already exist on a dealer lot. Ford couldn't bolt on a bigger motor and call it done. Whatever came next had to be street legal, built in real numbers, and fast enough to hold off a rival that was closing in. The constraint sat in the rulebook, not the engine bay, and the rulebook was about to push Ford toward a solution nobody in Detroit had fully committed to yet: winning through the shape of the car instead of the size of the engine underneath it. Ford's engineers looked at the problem differently. At the sustained high speeds of superspeedway racing, aerodynamic drag becomes the dominant force working against the car, more significant than additional engine power. So instead of chasing horsepower, Ford's team went after the shape. They stretched the nose forward by about 5 inches, past the standard Torino sheet metal, and mounted the grille flush against the body instead of recessed behind a bumper opening. That flush grille eliminated what engineers called an air pocket, a source of drag around the standard Torino's recessed grille. They also reshaped the rocker panels along the bottom of the car, raising them by about an inch. Since NASCAR measured ride height from the bottom of the rocker panel, that change let the body itself sit an inch lower to the ground while still passing inspection. Lower meant a better centre of gravity and steadier handling through the corners. All of it reworked the shell around the engine, not the engine itself, answering a speed problem with aerodynamics instead of horsepower. Ford named the finished car after Talladega Superspeedway, the new track in Alabama that had just opened that year. The results came fast. Across the 1969 and 1970 seasons, the Talladega and its factory-backed successors won 29 Grand National races, the most of any model. Though some sources count wins from Ford's related Cyclone Spoiler 2 in that total as well. David Pearson drove one to his 3rd NASCAR championship, and Ford took the manufacturer's title for 1969. Richard Petty, then already the biggest name in the sport and previously loyal to Plymouth, signed with Ford for the 1969 season around the same time. A move that suggested how seriously competitors were taking the car, though the full reasons behind his switch involve more than the Talladega alone. Step off the track and into a Talladega showroom model though, and the picture changes completely. The interior used the same bench seat as the base Cobra sports roof. It's believed that every production car came with a plain AM radio. A buyer walking onto the lot in 1969 would have seen a car with little to visually set it apart from the base model it was drawn from. On the track, it was the fastest thing Ford had. In the showroom, it looked like Ford hadn't tried at all. That gap is the part of the story most retellings skip past. Here's why the showroom version looked so plain. Homologation only required 500 units. Ford built around 750 Talladegas in total, just enough to clear the rule with some margin. Each one was hand-built in low volume, requiring far more labour per car than a standard production Torino. That process cost more per car than a standard Torino, while the car itself sold for about $3,680, only a few hundred more than the base model it came from. Ford lost money on every unit sold. None of that mattered to the business case, because the Talladega existed to satisfy a rule so the race version could compete, not to turn a profit as a product. The street car was the paperwork. The race car was the point. Every dollar spent on a plain interior or a basic radio was a dollar not spent chasing buyers, because buyers were never really the target. The 500 units NASCAR required as a minimum were a formality to satisfy, not a market Ford was trying to win, even though final production ran closer to 750. Ford was selling compliance, and the muscle car happened to be the shape compliance came in. 1970 brought a new problem. Ford had planned to retire the Talladega body for a redesigned Torino called the King Cobra, built with an even sharper aerodynamic nose. In early testing, the King Cobra underperformed. Its numbers on the track came in behind the 1969 Talladega it was supposed to replace. So Ford's race teams, several now running without factory support, kept racing the old 1969 Talladega bodies through the 1970 season instead. They won 6 more races that way, proving the shape still worked even a year and a rule cycle later. NASCAR noticed. At the end of the 1970 season, the sanctioning body capped the engine size, allowed for these cars at 305 cubic inches, well below the 427 and 429 cubic inches they had raced with over the 2 seasons. That single rule change made the aerodynamic advantage pointless, because a smaller engine couldn't generate enough speed for the shape to matter. The rulebook that made the Talladega's wins possible disappeared before any competitor beat it on track, and with it went the only reason the car had ever needed to exist. This is why the Talladega is hard to place in muscle car history. It never developed a signature look people wanted to own. Unlike the Superbird's wing or the Daytona's nose cone, it won consistently across 2 seasons, more than most of its aero-era rivals by most counts, and gets remembered less than either of them, because Ford built it to solve one specific problem: a homologation rule requiring real cars on real lots. NASCAR closed that path at the end of 1970 with the engine cap, and the Talladega ran out of purpose the same day. Ford never built this car for buyers, so no market carried it forward once the racing stopped. Styling was never the assignment, so no design legacy kept it in conversation decades later. Fast and legal were the only 2 requirements, for as long as the rulebook allowed both at once. The 500 cars NASCAR required turned into roughly 750 owners scattered across the country, most of them driving a plain Torino with a longer nose. Somewhere in a garage today, one of those cars still sits with its bench seat and its AM radio, holding a body shape that beat every muscle car Detroit had to offer. Ford built a loophole with a paint job, and it worked exactly once. Don't forget to subscribe to not miss anything cars and business.